sorry I'm delayed. I was actually listening to your reporting, your live report from your seat.
Any suggestions about things that we need to improve?
You know, I have a lot of suggestions, but I will keep that to myself.
Yeah, we'll chat.
Okay. Well, we'll chat later. Circle back. All right, happy Friday, everyone. Today, President Biden announced that his administration is taking action to conserve more than 13 million acres in the Western Arctic and to honor the culture, history, and enduring wisdom of the Alaska natives who lived on these lands for generations. From safeguarding sacred lands near the Grand Canyon to protecting Alaskan treasures, the Biden-Harris administration is conserving more than 41 million acres of lands and waters. This administration will continue to take ambitious action to meet the urgency of the climate crisis, protect America's lands and waters, and fulfill our responsibility to the next generations of Americans. On a more solemn note, as many of you know, tomorrow marks 25 years since the tragic shooting at Columbine High School. 2 students killed 12 of their fellow classmates and 1 teacher with guns they obtained from unlicensed dealers and without background checks. We continue to pray for the families and victims of the Columbine shooting, as well as communities across the country that are being torn apart by gun violence. Since Columbine, there have been hundreds of school shootings, exposing hundreds of thousands of students to the horrors of gun violence. As the president has said, this is not normal and it must end. That's why he signed into law the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the most significant gun safety legislation in decades, and created the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. We've also made the largest investment in youth mental health in American history. And just last week, the Biden-Harris administration implemented the largest expansion of the gun background check requirement since 1993, addressing the very loophole that allowed the Columbine shooters to obtain their weapons. Under President Biden's leadership, we are taking action. But we need Congress to finish the job. They need to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, require safe storage of guns, pass a national red flag law, and invest in proven solutions that reduce violence. Also enact universal background checks. And finally, I know there's a lot of interest in reports from the Middle East overnight. And we understand that, we get that. I'm going to say it now, though I know you all will certainly ask me about it, that we do not have any comment on the reports at this time. Obviously, you all heard from Secretary Blinken earlier this morning, but with that, Dorleen, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, thank you. On the Middle East, why is it that you don't have any comment at this time? It's been several hours since the reported strike. Certainly that's enough time for the administration to investigate and come up with something to say.
I'm just going to be really mindful, just going back to what I said just before I called on you to ask me this question. So I'm not going to speak or speculate about any of the reports that are out there. I'm not going to comment, and I'm just going to leave it there.
Can I ask you a domestic question?
Absolutely.
Average gasoline prices have risen about 20 cents a gallon in the past month. Oil production, domestic oil production is down slightly from its recent peak, and now we have the situation in the Middle East. How concerned is the administration about the combination of all of those things?
So we're going to continue to watch the markets very carefully. As you know, this is an administration, the Biden-Harris administration is committed to maintaining a stable and secure energy supply and lowering prices for Americans. As you saw the president, as you all know, when Russia invaded Ukraine and gas prices started to go up, inflation obviously was infected by that. The president took action and tapped into the SPR. So obviously we are focused on securing energy supply and, like I said, lowering prices for Americans. The United States' current record domestic oil and gas production is helping meet our immediate needs while we make the historic investment needed to transition into clean energy economy. But obviously, we're going to continue to watch the markets carefully.
Ms. Kareem, this level of silence from you guys about what's happening in the Middle East is really new. And I heard what you had to say, but can you explain why? Because the official line that we're not going to talk about this, that is the line, that is the choice. Mm-hmm. Is it part of your strategy to de-escalate?
Look, I'm going to, again, be super mindful, and I get the interest, obviously. I understand the interest, and going to be disappointing many people here this afternoon. I just don't have anything to share. I'm not going to speculate on the reportings out there. You heard the same. Obviously, you said what we've been saying since this morning. You heard from Secretary Blinken, and so I'm just going to be really, really mindful. But as you asked me as well about escalation, I'm going to speak more generally. We have been very, very clear from here, from the beginning, that we do not want to see this conflict escalate. We continue to consult with our allies and partners, including in the region, obviously, and to reduce further risk of escalation in the region. And that's a sentiment that was expressed in the G7 foreign ministries joint statement that went out this morning. You heard that, obviously, from Secretary Blinken, who was part of that meeting. I'm just going to be super mindful. I'm not going to speculate or speak to any of the reportings that are out there at this time.
Okay, and earlier this month, President Biden said that if Israel did not change its approach with regard to Gaza, then the U.S. would have to change its approach. Can you bring us up to speed about what Israel has done other than the steps that it announced in those immediate hours after the president?
So, look, we're continuing to have conversations, obviously, with our counterparts in the Israeli government. You know that, as you know, we put out a readout of the Rafah meeting yesterday, and it was a constructive meeting. So, obviously, the readout speaks out for itself. And as it says, the United States and Israel agreed on the shared objective to see Hamas defeated in Rafah. The U.S. side continued to express concerns with various courses in action in Rafah, and Israeli participants agreed to take these concerns into account and to have further follow-up discussions between experts. So certainly, as it relates to that, we'll have more to share, and we're going to continue to have those conversations with our Israeli government, with our counterparts there, and you know, the president made himself very clear. He made himself very clear.
So I'm actually talking about the commitments to do more to protect civilians and aid workers. Just this week,
yes,
an Israeli strike hit a refugee camp that killed several children. So I'm asking about the commitments to better protect people and to get more humanitarian aid.
Well, I think speaking about Rafah is also protecting, right, almost 1.5 million Palestinians who are seeking refuge in Rafah. So that is something that I wanted to make sure that was very clear. We care about that, which is why the president has been consistent about not wanting to see a major military operation. So I think that is important for folks out there to note. And look, we've been really clear. You know, the president had that conversation with the prime minister about making sure that we protect innocent civilians, as I just mentioned, and also the humanitarian aid workers. Look, we do not want to see that type of any civilians, any innocent civilians' life taken. We don't want to see any humanitarian aid workers, their lives being taken as well, as they're doing really, undertaking some, you know, really brave actions by making sure that what we're seeing in Gaza, the humanitarian crisis, that they are attending to that and making sure that people get the food, get the aid that they need. And so we're going to continue to have those conversations. The Israeli government said that they're going to take action, and we're going to continue to obviously speak with our counterparts there.
Thanks.
On Rafah, did the Israeli delegation give any indication that they were open to changing their plans?
So look, we're going to certainly continue to have those conversations. They shared their side of their concerns. We shared our concerns. I'm not going to go into details. We have the readout that we shared with all of you. Just don't have anything beyond that.
After the G7 meeting, the Italian foreign minister today said that the U.S. was informed by the Israelis at the last minute about this counterstrike in Iran. Is that accurate?
I'm not going to speak to our diplomatic conversations.
And then domestically here at home, a third Republican is expected to join the motion to vacate Speaker Johnson from his post. Would the president encourage Democrats to save Speaker Johnson his job? Was that part of the conversation that he had with the Speaker on Monday?
Well, I'll say this, and we've been very consistent, and I think that what I'll say will answer the question. We do not get involved when it comes to leadership in whether it's the Senate or in the House. We're very mindful. That is something that the members, in this case, the members in Congress have to decide on. As it relates to Democrats, Leader Hakeem Jeffries, that's something that he and his caucus have to make a decision on. We do not get involved.
The president doesn't have any opinion about
We
whether
do not.
Democrats should help save a Republican speaker in his job?
I mean, I've been asked this question many times, whether it's on the Senate side or the House side in the last 2 years, almost 3 years, when we've gone through these types of exercises, or the House has gone, in particular, has gone through this exercise, and we've been pretty consistent. There's nothing new here. We have said we're not going to involve ourselves in this. This is something, in this case, for members of Congress to decide.
Thanks, Green. Just about the call yesterday between U.S. and Israel, to what extent did Iran come up on the call?
Look, I'm going to be super mindful. I'm just not going to speak to diplomatic conversations. Obviously, we put out a readout, and so I'm just going to leave it. Not going to go beyond the
There
readout.
was a reference to that, but can you at least
I'm
talk
not.
about-
I'm not going to go beyond the readout that we shared with all
Did
of
the
you yesterday.
U.S. lobby Israel at all on a smaller scale response? Can you talk to that? Can you talk about that?
So I can say that I'm going to be mindful, because I'm not going to speak or speculate to any of the events from last night. And I know you all have a lot of questions on this. I get it. I understand. I want to be mindful here.
Okay, well, on domestic policy then, on U.S. Steel, I know you and I spoke a little bit about that yesterday as well. The transaction is under review at CFIUS, that process will sort of play out. But really, Japan is an ally, so what is really the national security concern here? I mean, is it Nippon's business in China? And at the same time, the president's, of course, pledging that, the company will stay in American hands. So is he confident that a CFIUS review will come up with national security complications? And if that happens, what is his concern primarily?
So let me just first say at the top, and you heard the president say this when he was making the announcement in Pittsburgh, that steel is the backbone of our economy. It's a backbone of our national security. It helped build the middle class. You heard directly from this president. The CFIUS has its own process. I'm not going to get ahead of that. And so I'm going to just let that process go. I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. And we've said before that this looks like this is an action for CFIUS to take on, and so that is what they're going to design. Obviously, they are designated to examine this, and so we're going to let that process
Is the
be.
White House telling CFIUS, is there sort of any kind of mandated
They're
timeframe
they're
here?
independent. They are independent body, and we're going to let CFIUS move their process.
How's the president, as confident as he is, pledging that the company will remain in U.S. hands?
Look, he believes, the president believes, that U.S. Steel will remain an American-owned and American-operated. We're going to let CFIUS run its operations, do its process. It is designated to do this process. I'm just not going to comment. But he believes strongly on that, as you just stated in your question.
Last weekend, President Biden advised the Israeli Prime Minister in his phone call to think carefully and strategically about next steps following Iran's attack against Israel. Is it the U.S. assessment that the Prime Minister took the President's advice and has tamped down concerns of escalation in the region?
Going to be mindful here. I'm not going to speculate or speak on any of the events that's been reported overnight. So I'm just going to leave it there. We have been very clear. You heard this from Secretary Blinken this morning about de-escalation, not escalating in the region. We've been very clear about that. Any question that is related to the reporting out there, I'm just not going to speculate or comment.
Okay, moments ago, someone set themselves on fire in front of the courthouse where Donald Trump's trial is underway. Are there any plans to step up federal authorities' presence, enforcement?
Yeah, so it's a very sad news. We're just learning this as you all were reporting this live. I was watching all of you reporting this live, so it's a developing situation. So I would direct your comments, your question at this time, at least to what's happening currently, to local authorities. I don't have anything beyond what you all are reporting. It's just happening and it's developing. It's obviously a very sad news.
Another question. More than 100 people protesting the war in Gaza were cleared off the Columbia University campus yesterday and arrested. Is the president aware of these arrests, and what is his message to these protesters?
So just let me say at the top, because I have to be mindful here, as you know, there is an investigation currently being led by the Department of Education. It's an ongoing civil rights investigation of Columbia University. So I won't speak to specifics about the protest here. There's a couple things I do want to say. Is that we know this is a deeply painful moment for many communities impacted by this conflict. The president and our administration continues to speak out and forcefully condemn anti-Semitism, and our administration is implementing the first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. In recent months, we've seen a shocking rise in anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and anti-Arab hate in the U.S. and around the world. He has also been clear that hate has no place in America, whether it is based on race, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, or any other form of hate, which is why there is no place for discrimination on college campuses or anywhere in America. The president also believes that free speech, debate, and non-discrimination on college campuses are important American values. When students are subject to hostile environments because of their faith or ethnicity, schools must act. Students must be safe to learn, and that's where we stand on that one.
And just to follow up on the protests, I get you don't want to go into specifics, but what does the president think about young people in America saying things like, "We are all Hamas and long live Hamas"?
Okay. I will say, look, this is a president that has been, since he's been in office, and the reason why he ran has been very clear about what he witnessed in Charlottesville. Let's not forget what we saw, the anti-Semitism, the bigotry, the hate that we saw in the street of Charlottesville, which, as I just stated, was one of the reasons that he decided to run. And no president has taken more action to combat anti-Semitism than this president. And so, in our national strategy, we made clear that when Jews are targeted because of their beliefs, because of their identity, or when Israel is singled out because of anti-Jewish hatred, that is anti-Semitism, and that is completely unacceptable.
I do have to ask you about a different topic.
Oh,
Why is President Biden saying that his uncle Bozie was eaten by cannibals?
so I answered this question yesterday. I believe I've seen some clips on your network about me answering this question. I don't have much to say beyond what I said to some of your colleagues. Look, I was there. I think you traveled with us too to Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if you were there at the memorial in Scranton. The president had a emotional and I think a symbolic moment. He had an opportunity as president to honor his uncle's service in uniform. He had an opportunity to be there as president to speak to the bravery of his uncle, and not just his uncle, but many U.S. service members that put their lives on the line on behalf of this country. So his uncle, who lost his life when the military aircraft he was on crashed in the Pacific after taking off near New Guinea, the president highlighted his uncle's story as he made the case for honoring our sacred commitment to equip those we send to war and take care of them and their families when they come home. And as he iterated, the last thing American veterans are, or the last thing Americans should be called, are suckers and losers. And that is, those types of words should not come from a commander-in-chief, as we have in the past. And we should actually be lifting up our American veterans and honoring them. And that's what you saw from this president.
And I agree, Second Lieutenant Ambrose J. Finnegan was a war hero, but the Pentagon says, for unknown reasons, the plane was forced to ditch in the ocean, both engines failed at low altitude. Why is President Biden saying he was shot down, there's no evidence of that, And why is he saying that his uncle was eaten by cannibals? That is a bad way to go.
He lost his life. It's not, look,
It's-
I'm not, we should not make jokes about
It's
this.
not.
Wait,
President Biden said
No,
that his
no.
uncle was eaten by
I mean,
cannibals.
your last line is, it's for a laugh, it's for a funny statement, and he takes this very seriously. His uncle, who served and protected this country, lost his life serving, and that should matter. You have a president that lifts up our U.S. troops, our American veterans, every day, who thinks about them, who actually thinks they're all heroes, and they are. And you have a former president who disrespects that, who doesn't honor that. Said it as president, suckers or losers. That's what he said.
Where did the
But-
cannibalism come
but-
from?
but I think you're missing the point. The point is you have a president that lifts up American veterans, who lifts up our U.S. service members. And that's what matters. He understands how critical and how important it is to be commander-in-chief. I'm going to move on. Go ahead.
Thanks. Does the president support the UAW's efforts to unionize this Volkswagen plant in Tennessee? Has he been involved at all or in touch with Sean Fain?
So I'm going to let, obviously, the union speak for themselves. I'm not going to comment on what's currently happening. You hear the president say this. He was in Pittsburgh. You saw how union members reacts to this president. He is the most pro-union president ever. And we're going to continue to lift up union members. We believe that they should certainly be paid fairly. We believe that they should get a contract that is fair. And we've said that over and over again as it relates to this particular situation that's happening. I'm just not going to speak to it. I'm going to let the union deal. Okay.
Karine, I know you alluded to this, and you said that you didn't want to speculate, but we're not asking for speculation. We're asking for an official response. And given that U.S. taxpayers give more than $3 billion each year for military defense systems to Israel, shouldn't Americans have a response from this administration more than 12 hours after this attack?
I appreciate the question, and I understand the importance of the American people, who, you are correct, they are taxpayers. And I want to be incredibly mindful here, and I understand the interest here. And I am going to continue to say, I'm not going to speak to this or speculate about the reports out there. That's not going to change, and just going to be super mindful.
So last week, the president warned Iran. He said don't when he was asked his message to Iran about retaliation. They did it anyway. He urged Israel to show restraint, and Israel, according to the reporting, has retaliated. Does the U.S. have any leverage in the region?
I know this is not going to be satisfying. I'm not going to speak to any of the reports out there. I'm just not going to do that. Not going to speculate. I will say, and you've heard this from my NSC colleagues, and you've heard this from many of us here at the White House. The president and the prime minister have a long-standing relationship that goes decades. And because of that long-standing relationship, they are able to speak very honestly with each other and have difficult conversations when it's necessary. That is the type of friendship that they have. I'm just not going to speak to any of the events that's been reported. Yeah, Justin.
Thanks, Karine. I appreciate you aren't ready to speak to it right now, but I don't think we're expecting to hear from you guys again until Tuesday. Can you make some sort of commitment to, brief on this before the middle of next week?
Look, what I will say is that I don't have any schedule to announce or anything to share about, speaking on the reports that are out there or making a comment. I wouldn't expect anything further beyond today. But again, want to be super mindful. Not going to speak to this. Not going to give comments. No, I understand, but it's hard for me to say to you before Monday. I don't have anything in the docket. I don't have any schedule to speak to at this moment, at this time. I just can't speculate or speak to any of the reports that are being, any of the reporting from the event overnight.
A couple domestic ones then.
Sure.
There's reports overnight that Sony is discussing a bid for Paramount that would push consolidation among in Hollywood and among studios to some of the tightest we've ever seen it. Considering the White House's push for competition, do you guys have any concerns about such a deal?
So look, as you mentioned, the Competition Council is something that the president put together because he wanted to make sure that there's fair competition out there. So obviously it's important to have that Competition Council. I'm not going to speak on the potential action that may be taken by Sony. I'm just going to leave that there.
And on 702, Senator Durbin, the Democratic whip, has not backed down on his push for an amendment that would require warrants for certain information. Does the White House feel confident that this is going to get through the Senate today to avoid the lapse that would happen if it wasn't reauthorized? And why do you think you've been unable to convince Senator Durbin not to push forward with this?
On which piece?
The amendment on 702.
Yeah, on FISA. Also going to be careful here. I don't want to get ahead of the most important point here, which is the provision underpinning the government's most critical foreign intelligence tool. As you know, Section 702, which is also FISA, is going to expire today, and along with other provisions. Look, Section 702 provides irreplaceable information on almost every threat that the American people expect their government to find and stop: terrorist plots, illicit fentanyl, ransomware, and other cyber attacks, Russian war crimes, and many more. And so we're going to continue to urge the Senate to act to authorize it now. It is the bipartisan bill is currently, as you just stated in your question, in the Senate, and so we strongly support it. And so we're going to continue to have those conversations with Senate members on making sure that we move forward with it, encouraging to pass it. This is something that our Office of Leg Affairs, obviously National Security Council, has been on top of, not just this past week, not just today, but for several weeks now. And we want to strongly see it move forward. And as you can imagine, we're having conversation with senators. And so hopefully we see that.
Thanks, Karine. Just going back to the Columbia protests really quickly, does the president see these arrests as a threat to freedom of speech or assembly?
I mean, look, I got to be super careful. I got to be really mindful. There is an investigation currently happening ongoing with Columbia University about the Civil Rights Act, that's under the Civil Rights Act, and so going to be super mindful. I laid out the importance of freedom of speech, but also the importance of making sure that students don't feel fearful, and making sure students are able to go to school feeling safe. And so I have to be really, really careful here because there's an investigation, and so I'm just going to leave it there. I'll say one more thing. We understand that this time is incredibly painful for many Americans, and at the same time, right, it's important for schools to protect students. It is one of the things that we have to do as respecting, and also they must do this respecting their freedom, obviously, to debate on their campuses. But students should feel safe.
And one more, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
The president has made a lot of policy, notable policy moves recently with student loan, debt forgiveness, and the steel tariffs, and the drilling moves in Alaska. Are all of these, can you just talk about why are these happening right now? And are they an attempt to kind of just shore up the Democratic base?
Look, I would read this as what the president promised in 2020. What the president said when he walked into this administration. He said, climate change is a crisis, is one of the crises that we are dealing with, not just here in this country, but obviously globally. And he has been incredibly progressive on this, taking actions that we have not seen any other president take. And so this is his commitment. I would see this as a commitment that he has made, not just to young people, but to Americans, as our role as the United States, obviously as the United States of America, to make sure that we are doing our part in dealing with climate crisis. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing that from this announcement today, but from many other announcements. So it's not just now. He's been doing this from day one of this administration.
Thanks, Karine. Firstly, can I just ask you, has the President been briefed on these reported events that you don't wish to speculate on?
So I knew some humor would be coming in, and I appreciate the humor. So I will say this, the president is regularly kept up to date in real time by his national security team, and certainly the last 24 hours, there's no exception there. But again, as you just stated in your question to me, I'm just not going to speculate on any specific events.
Okay, just one other thing on Ukraine, if I may.
Yep.
If a supplemental passes, how soon do you anticipate that U.S. military aid could start getting through to Ukraine again? Is there any timeline?
Right away. Right away. We have been clear since October, since we put forth the original, obviously, national security supplemental, how critical it was to get that Ukraine aid to the brave people of Ukraine who have been fighting to protect their democracy, fighting for their freedom, obviously. And so we've been saying it is critical, it is critical. They have been losing ground because of Congress inaction. But we are, and I'll add this, we are very grateful to see that the House is moving, to see that it is moving in a bipartisan way. We want to get that out of the House, obviously, out of the Senate, to the desk of this president, and he will sign it right away so that the brave people of Ukraine can get that aid. We know what Mr. Putin wants to do. He wants to take over their sovereign territory, and we cannot allow that. We know what happens when you do not stop a tyrant, when you do not stop a dictator, and we cannot have that history repeat itself. Okay, John.
Thanks a lot, Kareem. Following up on that legislation regarding Ukraine that will be likely voted on tomorrow, Plan A was for the House to take up that bill that passed the Senate 70 to 29. That apparently is not happening. Is this, for the administration, a satisfactory Plan B, having this standalone bill passed by the House?
Well, we see it as, and he said this, the president said this maybe 2 days ago. I'm losing track of my days this week, but he strongly supports this package to reinforce Israel and Ukraine. And let's not forget the humanitarian aid that's needed for the Palestinian people in Haiti, in Sudan. This is important humanitarian aid. Let's not forget the security in Indo-Pacific. So this is what this package is going to do. The president strongly supports that. He, as I just stated to Danny, your colleague here, that the president wants to see it moved out of the House. Which is, I'm going to let the House speak to their protocols and their processes. It's going to move out of the House. He wants to see it move out of the Senate. He wants to see it on his desk so he can sign it, so we can get that aid, the security assistance, obviously, to Ukraine. That's very needed. I talked about the humanitarian aid that's needed. The all-important aid that's needed to Israel as well and Indo-Pacific. This is important, but we see it as a package. That's how it's moving forward.
And then in response to Danny's question, you said that Ukraine has been losing ground because of congressional inaction.
Yep.
Inaction in
That's
the House.
something we've said multiple times.
So is it your expectation that because of this package that likely will pass the House, hopefully from your perspective pass the Senate, get to the president's desk, that Ukraine can win back that ground that they've lost because of congressional inaction?
Look, what we need to do right now is make sure that they have the security assistance to defend themselves, to defend their sovereign territory. I can't speak to the military operations on the ground, and what I'm repeating is something that the CIA director said even yesterday. He said that to the Big Four when they met very early on this year, that they are losing ground, and congressional inaction is hurting what Ukraine is trying to do. So we want to see, right now we're seeing action. I want to be very clear, we're grateful for the action that we're seeing coming out of the House. We want to see it out of the House, out of the Senate, to the desk of the president so that he can sign it. And so we are grateful for that movement that we're seeing. And we're grateful to both the Speaker and Leader Jeffries that they're moving in a bipartisan way to get that all very important, needed national security supplemental aid to Ukraine, Israel, humanitarian aid, obviously, and also the security of Indo-Pacific.
Two questions, both on the aid bill. The first one is more logistical, kind of a follow-up. What kind of engagement will the president have over the next day or so? Is he planning any calls to House members, to Speaker Johnson, and how is he ingesting sort of what's going on?
So a couple of things. As you know, earlier this week, the president had a call with the Big Four. And that was, you're talking about the, national security supplemental. So you had a call with the big four, and I think that's important to note. And on Monday, the Speaker Johnson, reached out to the president to share his plan for the national security supplemental. Obviously, the president shared his support for moving that package forward. And throughout the week, but I mean, not just a week, it's been some time now. You have our offices here, Office of Leg Affairs, other advisors to the president, meeting, talking regularly with leaders in Congress to talk about, to offer any assistance here, but provided consistent briefings, continued consistent briefings. That hasn't stopped on pressing national security needs. And so those conversations continue. The president has been very much engaged in this week, this past week. And so, look, we want to see this moving. We want to see this moving. We're grateful to the leaders for getting this moving. Certainly looks like out of the House. We want to see it moved out of the Senate, get this signed by the president, so we can get that all important national security needs to protect our national security, obviously.
But anything as it comes over the finish line over the next day or so?
Don't have anything from the president himself reaching out. Don't have anything else to share, but the president has been engaged. He talked to the big four, and Speaker Johnson called him to lay out what was in, how he was moving forward, what was in the package, and we appreciated that.
Let me ask just one more.
Yeah, sure.
The president is a student of history. He ran largely on returning norms to Washington.
Yeah.
What does he think about the fact that, for the second time in 7 months, we're kind of knocking on the door of ousting another House Speaker?
So, I mean, you said something that I probably should have said in my answer to you about how we're moving, how the National Security Supplemental is moving. Look, it's moving in a bipartisan way. You're right. The president believes in the way to get things done for the American people, to do it in a bipartisan way, and that's what we're seeing with this National Security Supplemental. Because it's not just about Ukraine and Israel and Indo-Pacific. It's also about our own national security, which is why it's important that we step in, and this is why it's important that we move quickly here. And so I think that's important to note, that we are seeing a bipartisan process here as it relates to our national security. Look, that is a question for House members to speak to. It is their decision on who their speaker is going to be. So that is something that they have to deal with. What the president wants to see is to make sure that really important initiatives, really important issues are moving forward, and that's what we're seeing with the National Security Supplemental. Again, I know I have to wrap.
On the National Security Supplemental, there's language in it that has the language that would force the sale of TikTok that could eventually lead to a TikTok ban. That's stalled in the Senate. Is the White House concerned about legal challenges that might come to that piece of the bill?
Look, we have expressed strong support, obviously, for the package, and certainly we'll continue. The national security package certainly will continue to show our support, as I've been doing for the past few minutes here. And it was this bill, obviously this national security package includes this bill, as you just mentioned, which has improved thanks to the leadership of members of the House and the Senate. So in that, what you're talking about, the TikTok divestment, not a ban of the app TikTok, there's been improvements in this made by both chambers. So we're proud to see that. And just to be very clear, it is not a ban, it is a divestment. It would ensure that ownership of these apps wouldn't be in the hands of those who can exploit them and to do us harm. And so that's how we're seeing.
Will be a ban.
Well, that's not, look, let's see where this goes. We support the package as it certainly stands. There's been improvement made to it. We think that matters. We see this as a divestment, not a ban. And it is important. This is another piece of our national security and protecting our national security, protecting American people. So making sure that they don't get exploited and that harm could be done. Go ahead, Garen.
Ahead of the cannabis holiday 4/20, a few advocacy groups, including the Drug Policy Alliance and SPLC, sent a letter to the president thanking him for his actions on marijuana reform, but they say that it falls short of promises he made when he was a candidate in 2020 that he would decriminalize marijuana. They acknowledged that the rescheduling of marijuana is an attempt to address racial equities, but they say that it doesn't go far enough. They want the president to publicly support decriminalization. Does the White House believe that it has done enough as it relates to the issue of marijuana reform?
I mean, look, on decriminalization, the president has been very, very clear. He doesn't believe that anyone should be in jail or be prosecuted just for using or possessing marijuana. He continues to say that. He believes that. As you know, he asked the Secretary of HHS and the Attorney General to initiate the administrative process to review how marijuana is being scheduled. HHS concluded their independent review, which was guided by evidence, by science, which is what we believe here in this administration. And now the scheduling review is now with the Department of Justice. And so certainly the process is still going, the review is still going, so DOJ has this. But the president has been really, really clear about how he feels about the people being prosecuted just for using or possessing marijuana. That has not changed. And now HHS has did their review, and now DOJ. It's in the hands of DOJ.
Any future announcements, whether future pardons or anything else?
I don't, as it relates to pardons, I don't have anything to preview at this time. But look, there's a review that Department of Justice is currently undergoing, so we got to let them do their review. The president's been pretty clear on where he stands on this, and so I would refer to Department of Justice on any, on rescheduling and their review. I do have to wrap it up.
Thank you, Corinne. In light of recent events that we're not discussing, is there less pressure on the president to condition aid to Israel?
Not going to speculate on any of the events that have been reported. Me answering that question would be speculating on those said events, so I'm not going to speculate on those events or any of the reports that are out there. And I know that is not satisfying to all of you, but that is where we are. Yep.
The House Israel bill includes a provision that congressional notification of foreign military financing obligation may be waived under emergency authority of the Secretary of State, which means up to $3.5 billion of weapons can potentially be provided to Israel without notifying lawmakers. Does the administration believe that the American taxpayers have the right to know what kind of weapons we're sending to Israel?
So let's let the process move forward, but you have heard from me, you've heard the president, we support this package. This is about our national security. This is about, making sure we saw what happened, obviously, with Iran and what happened recently, earlier this week, and how they, and what they did and how they attacked Israel. So we understand, right? We understand that we have to continue our strong commitment to Israel's security. That continues to be ironclad, but it's not just that's in the national security package. We're also talking about Ukraine. We're also talking about humanitarian aid to the Palestinian people, to the people of Sudan and Haiti, and this is really, and the security of Indo-Pacific, obviously. So we support that package. I'm not going to get into speculation here. Let's let the House do their process and the Senate do their process.
And then just one last one, Corinne. I know that Jake told us that he's consulting with allies and partners on the Middle East issue. I was wondering, has the administration had any conversation with China regarding the Middle East since last Saturday?
Don't have anything to share beyond the readout that we had when the president spoke to President Xi. Outside of that, don't have anything else. All right, thanks everybody.
At Duke Energy, we deliver electricity and so much more, like free home energy assessments, rebates for energy-saving improvements, payment options to help you better manage your budget, and even bill credits for helping the community use less energy. So no matter what you're doing, we can help you make better energy choices every day. It's just another way we bring power to your life. How much can you save?
Whoa! Hello, hello, hello! It's good to be home. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As my mother would say, God love you. Please have a seat if you have. I don't want y'all have to stand for me. Well, I tell you what, man. The reason I got the first 4 years is the IBEW, and that's no malarkey. You guys stood up first. Kenny, thanks for that introduction. I tell you what, I caught the tail end of his little film there. Pretty impressive. He's now a movie star. Look, most of all, I want to thank Kenny and all of you for your partnership and your friendship. Union workers, IBEW, I'm president, and that's no malarkey because of you. That's no joke. I wouldn't be standing here if you not stepped up when you did in 2020. I was home in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where I was raised, and I visited the place I used to live in, etc. And I tell you what, my grandfather Ambrose Finney, he'd be proud as hell. I'm listed as the most pro-union president in history. I had an uncle named Ed Finnegan. He said, "Joey, you are our union from belt buckle to shoe sole." Well, I tell you what, it's because you built the country. You're proof of what I've always known. And I mean this sincerely. I've been saying it for a long time. But it's finally getting through, not to you, but to everybody. Wall Street didn't build America. The middle class built America. And unions built the middle class. And that's you built the middle class. There would be no middle class without you. Folks, you've been hosting this conference for a long time, but it's fair to say, in the last 4 years, there's been more excitement and energy than ever in all the work you're doing. I know because I see you all across America as I go across the country. Thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, 51,000 new infrastructure projects have been announced so far, and we're just beginning. Roads, bridges, ports, airports, clean water systems, affordable high-speed internet, all across America, installed by IBEW workers. I said when you guys endorsed me, when I think of climate, I think of unions. I think of jobs. Improved power grids, new offshore wind turbines put up by the IBEW workers. A national network of 500,000 electric vehicle stations are going to be built by IBEW workers. And let's hear it for Davis-Bacon requirements. They guarantee these projects will pay a prevailing wage. Project labor agreements to make sure they hire highly skilled workers who have a voice on the job. And by the way, these projects are using American-made materials, creating even more good-paying American jobs, union jobs. You know, since the 1930s, and I have to admit to you, in my early days in the Senate, I didn't realize this law said it. The law that established the rights of union to organize back in the 30s, well, that law said a little piece of it no one paid much attention to. The law said that when the federal government spends taxpayers' dollars, it has to buy American products with it, and it has to use American labor. But that was honored in an exception. No, the vast majority of the presidents didn't do it. And the last guy didn't even know it. A lot of things he doesn't know. But look, that's Buy American. Past administrations, including my predecessor, failed to uphold it. But not anymore. My administration uses American products and American labor to build those products. And by the way, for all you skilled trade representatives out there, it's totally within all the rules and regulations. And there's no violation. We're not violating anything, man, except we're showing the world what we can do. At the same time, we're making the most significant climate investments ever. When I think of climate, I think of jobs, union jobs, good-paying jobs, many that don't require a college degree. And that's what we're seeing. We've attracted $700 billion in private investments in advanced manufacturing, clean energy, and more here in America, creating tens of thousands of good-paying IBEW jobs. The bottom line is, this is not exaggeration, the next decade and beyond, you'll be coming to this conference seeing how critical the IBEW is and how transformative the project you're going to be making for the country. And I mean transformative. Take nuclear power, the biggest source of clean energy. It employs over 60,000 workers, including many of you. The key to meeting the goal of 100% clean power grid by 2035 depends a lot on it. That's why we're keeping existing plants open, restarting shuttered plants, and building America's first new nuclear plants in decades. And we're investing to make sure America leads the way on new technologies like advanced small modular reactors of the future. It also means manufacturing the fuel that's needed to run these reactors. For too long, we've relied on imported uranium to power nuclear reactors. Imports from places like Russia that we can't trust at all. My administration is working to change all that. We're investing $3.4 billion in producing advanced nuclear fuel right here in America. You know, folks, this is, I know we're going to look back on this 20 years from now and talk about what a revolutionary period this was for the country. We're going to make a real gigantic difference. Today, I can announce that the IBEW plant in Southern Ohio has already produced the first 200 pounds of that powerful enriched uranium. The first ever made in America. And it's on track to produce nearly a ton by the end of the year. Enough to power 100,000 homes in this country. Folks, thanks to your partnership revitalizing key American industries, we're reducing reliance on imported oil, creating more jobs for IBEW workers. So far, more than 2,000 new clean energy projects have come online nationwide since I took office, creating tens of thousands of good-paying jobs. We're giving tax breaks that are 5 times greater to projects that are providing prevailing wage. If you don't provide prevailing wage, you don't get the tax break. And we use registered apprenticeships to train their workers. Look, we've invested $440 million to expand registered apprenticeships programs. Most Americans may not know, and I love it, and you guys should talk more about it, in my humble opinion. Everybody thinks, I want to be an electrician. I show up, well, here's your card. Come on, man. Think about it. By the way, go on out and ask people who know you're acquainted with, who aren't in the business at all. What's it take to be an electrician? You say, well, you just say, you get a little bit of training. 4 to 5 years of training to become an electrician. You're the best in the world. That's why it's a real thing. No, I really mean it. I mean it. You're the best in the world. It's like having to go to college, for God's sake. I'm serious. Well, I tell you what, every businessman I talk to, I remind them of who you are. Not a joke. Not a joke. And once workers are trained, we're making sure they get the good pay and benefits they deserve. Through my American Rescue Plan, I also enacted the Butch-Lewis Act, the most pro-labor union worker law retirees in 50 years. All we're doing is protecting pensions for thousands of IBEW workers and others. The idea they made it as hard for them to get it done just blows my mind. But we made it happen. While my predecessor never lifted a finger to do any help. Matter of fact, he lifted a finger, he put a thumb on it. Look, not only that, he put union busters on the National Labor Relations Board. The people I've appointed to the National Labor Relations Board actually care about American workers. No, I'm not kidding. And despite the Supreme Court and our Republican friends trying to block us, they haven't stopped me from pursuing an alternative path to relieve the crushing burden of student debt. That includes forgiving loans for vocational schools, community college, and some apprentice programs as well. By the way, all these things are saving America money. We're not costing money. It's saving America. It's growing the economy, for God's sake. People are doing better. I could go on, but I'm not going to. I'm going to resist the temptation. Because, boy, I'm tempted these days. Together, we're doing what always worked best for this country. We're investing in America. It's not complicated. We're investing in Americans, not just America, Americans. Building an economy from the middle out, from the bottom up, not the top down. Not the top down. Because when you do that, the poor have a ladder up, the middle class does very well, and the wealthy still do very well, except they don't pay enough taxes. By the way, just parenthetically, you know how much we have 1,000 billionaires in America. You know what the average federal tax rate is for them? Billionaire, billion, not million, billion. 8.3% federal tax. No, I'm serious. Isn't it bizarre? Anybody willing to trade their tax rate for yours? Raise your hand. Look, and folks, our plan is working. So far, we've created 15 million new jobs. Unemployment hasn't been this low for this long in 50 years. And that includes record low unemployment for black and Hispanic workers as well. Wages are rising. Manufacturing is booming. We've created close to 800,000 new manufacturing jobs since I became president. I got to tell you, when I was a senator and vice president, I got so sick and tired. I know a little bit about corporations. There are more corporations registered in my home state of Delaware than every other state in the union combined. They're not all bad guys, but they ain't all good guys either. Look, think what's happened, all kidding aside, from the previous 15 years, 20 years. Corporations look for the cheapest labor in the world, sent the jobs to those laborers, whether they were in Asia or Europe, wherever they were, and then they sent the product back home. Well, instead of importing foreign products, I'm exporting for their products, and we're making those jobs American jobs, created here in America, where they belong. It's not that complicated. I really mean it. 550,000 jobs brought home. Home, home, home. But it's pretty basic stuff. I won't get off course here talking about the chips, but all those computer chips we invented, we made about the tip of the finger size of it. But guess what? I went over to South Korea. They said, "What are you doing that for?" I said, "I'm going to get them to invest in America." Instead of us having to import all this stuff, we had this space between what we needed and what we could get. Well, guess what? We created $550 billion in investments here. They're bringing here, and I asked the guy at Samsung why. You know what he said to me? He said, "You have the best workers in the world, and you have the safest place in the world to invest." Look, folks, my predecessor and his MAGA allies have a very different view. He promised infrastructure week, every week for 4 years, and never built a damn thing. In fact, now these same Republicans, they want, and this is not your father's Republican Party, this is a different breed of cat, these MAGA Republicans. Now they want to repeal the climate law that would gut all those new jobs and industries we're creating here in America. My predecessor rolled back protection for American workers. He opposed increases in federal minimum wage, and he was proud, very proud of his $2 trillion tax cut when he was president that overwhelmingly benefited the wealthy and created the biggest corporations and exploded the federal debt. I cut the federal deficit. He exploded it. By the way, there's no exaggeration here. It's going to expire. And if I'm reelected, it's going to stay expired. Look, let me close with this. There are two different ways of looking at our economy. Some folks learned very different lessons growing up than you and I did. I learned the best way to they learned, and my opponent learned the best way to get rich is inherited. I can't argue much with that, but yeah. They learned that paying taxes It's for working people, not the super wealthy. They learn that telling people you're fired is something to be laughed about. Not where I come from, not where I was raised. I guess that's how they look at the world from Park Avenue to Mar-a-Lago. But I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware. Working class and middle class towns, what many of you did as well. Nobody handed you anything. You paid your taxes. And being told you were fired wasn't entertainment, it was a devastating nightmare to a family. Folks, where we come from, it matters. That's why when I look at the economy, I don't see through the eyes of Mar-a-Lago. I literally see through the eyes of Scranton, where I grew up at my grandpa's kitchen table. I see through the eyes of working people like you and the basic values that you represent. Honesty, decency, hard work, faith. It matters. Fairness matters. And you believe like I do, everyone in America deserves just an even shot. No guarantee, just a shot, but guaranteed to have a shot. In America, we leave nobody behind where we come from. Folks, that's the America you all are building. That's the America you're recreating. And let me ask you, are you going to keep doing it? I know we can do this because of you, the American worker. And I've never been more optimistic about our future than I am today. Folks, we just have to remember who the hell we are. We're the United States of America, and there's nothing beyond our capacity. Nothing, nothing, nothing. God bless you all. Thank you, and on behalf of America, thank you. You've really done it.
At Taco John's, you can expect one thing, so good, as in quality ingredients, used in tacos and burritos made just for you. Every single bite. So good. Expect nothing less at Taco John's.
I do not have anything off the top, Matt, so if you would like to kick us off.
Before I get into what's going on at the UN and then with Iran and this other kind of thing, can you clear up either to kill or keep alive these persistent reports that you guys have told the Israelis that you're okay with them going ahead with the Rafah operation as long as they don't attack Iran?
So we've been pretty clear, Matt, that any kind of operation into Rafah requires some pretty serious planning because of the three main components that you've heard me, Matt, the Secretary, outline pretty seriously before. First and foremost, of course, the more than 1 million people seeking refuge in Rafah, the region itself continuing to be an important conduit for humanitarian aid and an important conduit for the safe departure of foreign nationals. So any kind of operation into Rafah would require serious planning, and we would seriously oppose anything that is done without factoring in those various pieces when considering how to conduct a military operation into Rafah.
Okay, that's an excellent answer to a question that I don't think I asked. I asked you whether or not the U.S. has told the Israelis that you're okay with a Rafah operation as long as they limit or don't attack Iran in response to what happened over the weekend.
So, Matt, I don't want to. The devil is in the details here. It would require what kind of operation into Rafah we're talking about. If it is one that is reflective of these three very serious concerns that we have, I'm not going to preview or get into hypotheticals, but those are some serious areas of concerns, and our continued engagement with our partners in Israel continues to be that when it comes to Rafah, these three things need to be addressed, and you need to have a plan for them. So that's going to continue to be our message, and that is separate from our unwavering commitment to Israel's security and their self-defense and their ability to defend themselves.
All right, so regardless of whether Israel does anything in response to the Iranian attack over the weekend, you still would oppose a Rafah operation unless what you just mentioned are. So why can't you just say no, that it is not true that you have told?
It's not true. It's not true, but I'm
why
speaking...
couldn't you have just said that in the beginning instead of going on for...
Because I
thought the question was pretty clear.
Wasn't that clear? I'm trying to be specific, in response to your question.
All right, and then as it relates to Rafa, this call today, is it over?
Our colleagues at the White House will have a readout later in the afternoon. I don't have a sense on the status, but Admiral Kirby spoke briefly about this on Air Force One. National Security Advisor Sullivan is going to be conducting this meeting happening today. We'll have participants from the State Department tuned in and joined for that conversation, but I will leave it to colleagues at the White House.
But as far as you know, the call is not over? Or
I don't have a sense on timing.
All right, last one. The UN right now, I think, the Security Council is voting or about to vote on this Palestinian recognition resolution. How are you guys going to vote?
So, Matt, since October 7th, we have been pretty clear that sustainable peace in the region can only be achieved through a two-state solution with Israel's security guaranteed. And it remains our view that the most expeditious path toward statehood for the Palestinian people is through direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority with the support of the United States and other partners who share this goal. We believe this approach can tangibly advance Palestinian goals in a meaningful and enduring way. We also have been very clear consistently that premature actions in New York, even with the best intentions, will not achieve statehood for the Palestinian people. Additionally, as reflected in the report of the admission committee, there was not unanimity among the committee members as to whether the applicant met the criteria of membership set forth in Article 4 of the UN Charter. Specifically, there are unresolved questions as to whether the applicant can meet criteria to be considered as a state. And Matt, as you also know, we've long called on the Palestinian Authority to undertake necessary reforms to establish the attributes of readiness for statehood. And note that Hamas, which is, as you all know, a terrorist organization, is currently exerting power and influence in Gaza, which would be an integral part of the envisioned state in this resolution. And for that reason, the United States is voting no on this proposed Security Council resolution.
Okay.
As an
Again,
expert of the UN,
buried
Matt,
the
I
lead
will also just so note that due to statutory requirements, such an admission of statehood would also require the United States to cease its funding to the United Nations. But the U.S. is committed to intensifying its engagement on these issues with the Palestinians and the rest of the region, not only to address the current crisis in Gaza, but to advance a political settlement here that we think can create a path to Palestinian statehood and membership in the United Nations.
All right, and then you said you believe, the U.S. believes that the most expeditious way to statehood is through direct negotiations. So just to make sure, I just Googled expeditious. Marked by or acting with prompt efficiency. How many years has it been since Oslo? Isn't the most expeditious way to Palestinian statehood to have some kind of an announcement or a determination by the UN? Unless you don't really mean expeditious, because expeditious means fast.
We do mean expeditious, and we do not believe that the pathway through New York and the United Nations is the best path forward. And as I so noted, such action through the United Nations would statutorily require the United States to cease its funding to the UN. That's certainly not something we're interested in doing either. I take your point on the number of years it has been since Oslo, but this is something that we will continue to pursue because we so firmly believe that it is in not just in the interest of the Palestinian people, but it is a key tenet of establishing peace and security for the people of Israel as well.
Thanks.
Humaira, go ahead.
Then so, what is the U.S. Alternative and the expeditious path to two-state solution then, if you guys have block this?
You've heard us talk about this pretty clearly, Humaira. We're continuing to press for a ceasefire, one that is coupled with the release of hostages, one that is coupled with the influx of additional humanitarian aid, and one that we hope can create additional conditions for broader diplomatic conversations that we think can lead to greater peace and stability in the region. This is a process. I will note that expeditious does not mean easy, but it is a process, and
but
we're
it
going
does mean fast.
but it is one that we're going to continue to work at.
Right, but you see, you're pursuing this mega deal in the Middle East, like Saudi-Israel normalization, and then tied to that is PA reform and the creation of a two-state solution. And let's assume for a moment that all of that would go swimmingly. Netanyahu has to agree to that, and he has repeatedly rejected to the creation of a Palestinian statehood. So can you explain how your alternative approach is going to prevail, expeditiously or not?
Well, officials in Israel also know that further integration into the Middle East region can reap benefits for them and for the people of Israel. And so they recognize the work that is at hand and what is at stake. So we're going to continue to work at this. And in every conversation with our partners in Israel and other partners in the region who share a convergence on this idea, we'll continue to engage on this.
One last thing on this.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that the creation, like the path for a Palestinian state at the UN, U.S. would veto this regardless of the timing? If this would come up again in 3 months' time, you would still veto it, or does it have anything to do with this particular moment in time?
I'm not going to preview our actions on Security Council resolutions down the line or get into hypotheticals. I think that would be pretty irresponsible. Speaking in the context of the text and the iteration that was on the table today. But again, I would echo what we have said pretty consistently, is that we do not think that actions in New York, even if they are the most well-intentioned, are the best appropriate path. We think the best path forward is direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, supported by the United States and other regional partners.
And the final thing is on aid. So over the last couple of days, both you and Matt this week have talked about an improvement on the overall humanitarian aid picture from Gaza. But Guterres and other UN officials have been still talking about limited progress. They're giving pretty specific examples. For example, one is like Israeli authorities have cleared more aid convoys, but apparently those clearances are often granted when it's too late in the day to make the deliveries and return safely. They don't want their personnel to operate in darkness, in a war zone littered with unexploded ordnance. So are you aware of these difficulties? Because it does sound like while you guys are talking about improvement, on the ground, that improvement doesn't seem to be happening.
I'm not sure you caught the totality of Matt and mine's briefings, because both of us were, I don't know about that, both of us have been incredibly clear on two fronts. There has been some measurable progress that we've seen when it comes to humanitarian aid getting into Gaza, but the circumstances within Gaza continue to be dire, and more absolutely needs to be done. The crisis that we're seeing demands rapid expansion of these efforts. We were talking about making sure additional aid gets into Gaza, making sure additional steps and measures are taken towards deconfliction and appropriate humanitarian access. We'll continue to work at these and push for these kinds of things, but we have talked about both of these issues, Humaira, that we are seeing steps taken, steps that we believe are in the right direction, but both things can be true. We can see positive steps, but we can also feel sincerely and strongly that more absolutely needs to be done. And again, I talked a little bit about this yesterday. It's why we've so unequivocally supported a multiplicity of modalities of humanitarian aid getting into Gaza, whether it be land routes, whether it be airdrops, whether it also be the maritime corridor that President Biden spoke about at the State of the Union as well. Go ahead.
So,
I'll come back after.
thanks, Rodon.
Yeah.
To that point, Secretary Blinken and others said earlier this month, if we don't see changes that we need to see, there will be changes in our policy. And this is referring to Israel and their operations in Gaza and not doing more for humanitarian aid. So should we expect any changes in policy? And if not, why not? How soon would we see those changes in policy if Israel doesn't do more, as you said, it's such a dire situation? And then also on second question on Rafah, we're hearing from Israel that they have a plan that it involves tents in central Gaza. They are trying to do more to address the civilian need there. Is that plan satisfactory to the U.S.?
Let me answer the second first. I think we have been clear about this since October 7th, is that any kind of forced relocation or displacement of the Palestinian people within Gaza cannot and should not be part of any plan for an operation. That has been one of the principles that Secretary Blinken has been fairly clear about since the onset of October 7th. But going back to your first question, the Secretary and the President were very clear about it. It was about a week and a half ago when the Secretary spoke to this in Brussels, is that we expect there to be changes. Otherwise, there will be changes when it comes to our policy within Gaza. Like I said, there have been measurable and important positive steps in the right direction, but important work continues needs to be done, not just in the context of additional humanitarian aid, but also when we talk about deconfliction and the protection of civilians as well. So I don't have a timeline or an assessment to preview on this, but the President and the Secretary spoke quite clearly, and this is something we'll continue to be clear about with Israeli officials as well. Kylie, go ahead.
Just thinking, in the region, Qatar said today, the Prime Minister said that they're considering, what's the exact phrasing here? Sorry. They're considering basically pulling out of their role of mediating between Israel and Hamas, saying that they have been subject to political exploitation because of that role. What's the U.S. response to that? Are you guys encouraging them to stay as mediators, or allowing them to walk away if they want to?
So ultimately, I would refer to the government of Qatar and let them speak to their own decisions. But let me just say that in our viewpoint, Qatar has been an indispensable mediator when it comes to the current conflict in Gaza. The Prime Minister in specific has had an immeasurable role in the ongoing efforts to achieve an immediate ceasefire, release hostages, safeguard civilians, and ensure the delivery of appropriate humanitarian aid. We also were very clear with our partners, including Qatar, that after October 7th, it no longer can be business as usual with Hamas. But in terms of any decisions that the government makes, I will defer to that.
But if you're saying they're indispensable in their role, it sounds like you don't want them to walk away from
This is a decision for the government of Qatar to make. I'm simply speaking to the role that they have played thus far in the broader region.
Okay. And then ProPublica had a report out today that I want to ask you about, saying that the State Department, a panel, the Leahy Vetting Forum, recommended months ago that Blinken disqualify multiple Israeli military and police units from receiving U.S. aid after allegations that they'd committed serious human rights abuses. Is that accurate?
So the department takes the requirements under the Leahy Law very seriously, and we've taken extensive steps to implement the Leahy Law and for all countries in which this is applicable, not just Israel, all countries where this is applicable as it relates to U.S. assistance. Any Israeli security force that has been nominated as a potential recipient of U.S. assistance is subject to Leahy vetting via the normal process. There is a deliberative process in place. I'm not going to get ahead of our process as it relates to these ongoing determinations and decisions, and I will just leave it at that.
But typically, I mean, you don't have to get into the specifics of this this allegation, but can you just walk us through how long it would typically take for an allegation like this to be reviewed and then to be acted upon if it was presented in this
forum?
So I don't have a specific metric to offer, Kylie, but what we are talking about is a official policy and legal determination made on a specific unit or component of any particular state that is a recipient of U.S. assistance. So these are processes that can take time, especially in ensuring that we're reviewing all appropriate facts, we're reviewing all of appropriate details, and we're also reviewing the various components exist that under the various tools that we have at our disposal. In this instance, we're talking about LEHI, but there are, of course, other levers that we have as well, and these are deliberative processes, and we want to make sure that we're doing the work appropriately. And so I'm just not going to get ahead of that process.
Okay, but so it would be normal for this process to take months, even if it could have impact on an ongoing, crisis on the ground right now?
What I can say unequivocally is that units in Israel are subject to the normal vetting process that is consistent with the application of the LEHI law. I'm not going to offer a metric on how long these processes take, because various countries are different and various circumstances even within countries can be and are different. So I will just leave it at that. I'm gonna stick to the. I'm gonna make sure and I'll come to you. Go ahead, Dr. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you saw the Iraqi Prime Minister's comment about the Iranian attack to Israel. He denied if any drones or missiles were launched from the Iraqi to Israel during the Iranian attack. And the U.S. government, including the President Biden statement, they said that there were attacks on Israel from Iran. How did you get to that conclusion, and have you shared these facts with the Iraqi government?
So I'm not going to get into the details of our assessments from up here, but the vast majority of Iran's attacks on Israel were launched from Iran. They were unprecedented and reckless, and we condemn them in the strongest terms. We agree with our partners in Iraq that it is critical to avoid regional escalation, and it's something that we're continuing to work on with our Iraqi partners. It's also why we've urged the Iraqi government to continue to take action against militants and weapons that are outside of their control. Over the past few days, the President and Secretary Blinken have had a number of consultations with partners in the region and around the world, and we'll continue to push this engagement forward with world leaders on a way forward in the face of Iran's destabilizing and malign behavior.
And one more question. During the last few days, you met the Iraqi Prime Minister and the Iraqi delegation from different levels. So the Iraqi is looking to get some sanctions relief from the U.S. government. Especially, they said that we meet the requirements and we did some change and we removed some things from the banks and the companies. But as I learned from the Iraqi sources, that the U.S. has rejected their requests. Are you going to consider the Iraqi request to give them some sanction waiving or relieving some sanctions and removing some Iraqi banks or companies from this sanctions?
So I'm just going to defer to my colleagues at the Treasury Department to speak to information regarding specific sanction issues and any petitions that may or may not be in place for delisting. Go ahead.
So yesterday, Israel attacked South Lebanon, specifically Khiyam, along with 100 strikes, including phosphorus. And this is not the first time or second or 10th time phosphorus has been used in Lebanon, much more. And we know that this is it's banned against civilians. So do you have any comment on that? Do you condemn that?
I'd refer to the IDF to speak to any particular operation that they're conducting.
Have you seen these reports about the use of white phosphorus?
So I've seen the reports, but I will defer to our partners in the IDF to speak to specific operations. We have been incredibly clear with our partners in Israel and others about the need to avoid regional escalation as it continues to conduct operations in its self-defense.
Yeah, but it has been used more and more. So do you condemn? Do you condemn the use of that?
Again, I don't have any specifics to offer as it relates to this report.
Okay, one more question. So the Jerusalem court ordered the eviction of Palestinian families from Sheikh Jarrah on Monday. We always talk about a long-lasting peace in the region and a two-state solution. How do you see these evictions working towards a peace?
So I'm not familiar with the specifics as it relates to this circumstance, but broadly we have been very clear that these are the kinds of actions that we think incite tensions and cause escalation and further take us away from the two-state solution that we started this daily press briefing talking about. But again, I don't have the specifics on this case to comment specifically. Go ahead. Yeah,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Assistant Secretary Mr. Donald Liu and Elizabeth Host met with the Pakistani Finance Minister. Could you share some details and what kind of support Pakistan is asking from U.S. in terms of investments and economic growth?
So I'll let the government of Pakistan speak to any issues or topics that they may have raised in their engagement. But to take a step back, the Minister of Finances in the United States for a part of a series of engagements with not just within the U.S. government interagency, but also engaging with non-governmental organizations. And he met with senior State Department officials here. During the meetings, from our end, we encouraged Pakistan to prioritize and expand economic reforms to address its own economic challenges.
The Saudi foreign minister was in Pakistan, and now Iranian president coming to Islamabad next week. And the leadership of all these countries, Pakistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, are calling for ceasefire and agreed for joint efforts to bring peace in the region. How do you see these trips of Iranian and Saudi leadership to Pakistan and their joint efforts for the peace in the region?
Well, let's just talk about Iran in that context. I'm pretty confident in saying that unleashing hundreds and hundreds of UAVs and ballistic missiles on Israel is certainly not any kind of action that is actually in the interest and in the for the benefit of the Palestinian people. But look, as it relates to any visits that other foreign ministers or leaders might have, I will let their governments comment on that specifically. Broadly, we are continued to remain focused on de-escalation, and as it relates specifically to the crisis in Gaza, we have continued to call for a ceasefire, one that is coupled with the release of hostages and the additional serious influx of humanitarian aid.
What would you say about the joint efforts of these all countries, Pakistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia?
I will let them speak to any joint efforts that they might have. I think it's, from our vantage point, we remain fairly skeptical about Iran's intentions, given its continued and ongoing destabilizing and malign behavior as recently as just this past weekend. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Wait, sorry. What did you want to?
No, I wanted a new topic.
Okay. All right. Go
Let me
ahead.
ask on Georgia.
All right.
Your statements are becoming more and more pointed clear towards the Georgian officials. If I may ask you even more clearly, do you, partners, have the feeling that today the Georgian government is acting in favor of Russia's interests in Georgia?
Well, if you're talking about specific legislation, and let's just talk about the foreign agents draft law for a moment, our viewpoint is that similar legislation has been used by the Kremlin and elsewhere to stigmatize and repress civil society organizations, media organizations, and so such kind of legislative activity, it's not appropriate if your intended goal is to foster transparency.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jalil. And then I'll come to you, Michelle. I'm sorry.
Thank you
Go
very
ahead.
much, Mr. Patel. Only two questions. As my friend mentioned, the Iranian president is coming to Pakistan. Yesterday, a former Pakistan intelligence, very popular officer, Major Ahmed, on a TV interview stated that in the 80s, they had reported that Israel was going to attack Pakistan, nuclear weapons. Finance minister is here, as he mentioned. Imran Khan is in jail because when the Ukraine war started, the day he was there in Ukraine. In all this scenario, what's your and the finance minister is asking for money here. Do you see Pakistan with any independent policy, or do you have any suggestions for them what kind of route they should take?
So first, let me just say Pakistan continues to be an important partner in a number of areas. Particularly, it's a country we have an immense security cooperation with, and we of course are looking to continue to collaborate and work with the government of Pakistan. As I said to your colleague, the finance minister was here to participate in a number of meetings, not just across the interagency, but with NGOs and other outside groups. And from the State Department's perspective, during our engagements with them, we encourage them to prioritize and expand economic reforms to address its economic challenges.
One more, sir. Yesterday, Pakistan's largest political party, the PTI, one of its parliamentarians said that Pakistan has given bases to the U.S. I've been a journalist 25 years. I do not know whether they have. At the same time, we have this river in Pakistan, which is called the Justice Cleansing River, where people go in, they get corrupt, and then when they come out, they get cleansed. Former Prime Minister, who was convicted for corruption charges, yesterday got cleansed in that river. So now he's a clean guy. I'm just trying to understand that a little senior journalist is confused about the whole situation in the region where you have corrupt rulers coming to power, finance minister begging for financial institutes help. Do you see these sort of leaders and state institutions fighting with each other, by the way? Just last week this happened. So are you satisfied that in such leadership will make the kind of decisions which are in the interest of the U.S., who are corrupt leaders, basically?
Our partnership with Pakistan, our partnership with any government with Pakistan is rooted in what is, of course, in the interest of the American people and the people of Pakistan, and governments that are committed to working for the people of Pakistan. That's always been the case. And Michelle, go ahead.
I'd like to follow up on the decision yesterday on Venezuela. Is the U.S. at all worried about the impact of these sanctions on the migration crisis? And secondly, what kind of incentive now do you have? What's the incentive for Maduro to get back on a transition to democracy?
So first, as it relates to any concerns about migration, I think important to take a step back that in any places where we have sanctions, restrictions, export controls, things like that, there is always a space and a carve out for appropriate humanitarian products and goods, things like food, medicine, water, etc. But beyond that, I will just say broadly, of course, the United States is always going to enforce its immigration laws, but any additional steps or preparation that is happening, should that even be the case, I will defer to my colleagues in the Department of Homeland Security to speak about. But on the broader political context, Michelle, full implementation of the Barbados Agreement, in our viewpoint, offers the best path to restore democracy that Venezuelans deserve. We think it'll help improve economic and humanitarian conditions and also address the migration crisis. We welcome that Maduro representatives have invited participation of international election observer missions, but we also call on the Maduro representative to grant those missions the access and other requirements that they need to effectively perform their work. We're going to continue to support Venezuelans' aspirations for a more democratic, stable, and prosperous Venezuela while remaining fully committed to working with all parties interested in competitive elections. We're also going to continue to coordinate with regional and international partners in support of this Barbados agreement that we continue to think is key to get Venezuela on a democratic, stable, and prosperous path.
And has there been any follow-up with the Venezuelans, with the Maduro government since this decision yesterday by Treasury?
So there was, the White House spoke a little bit about this earlier in the month, but U.S. officials met with Maduro representatives in Mexico City on April 9th to express our concern about Venezuela's electoral process and the path that it was on, but I don't have any additional updates to offer. Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you, Mina. I have my own questions, but before that, let me quickly press you on Georgia. You just said, good statement, but it strikes me that it still reflects your reaction, not action. I mean, you do recognize that the draft law is Kremlin-inspired. There are some 80-odd, parliamentarians who have already voted for that. Where is the beef? Where is the sanction or any action that would discourage the rest from, voting for it?
Alex, I spoke pretty forcefully about this yesterday. We continue to remain deeply troubled by this draft law and its passage in the first reading, particularly the way that it targets and stigmatizes civil society organizations and media organizations. We think that they are cornerstones of any democratic system. We are closely monitoring the situation, particularly closely monitoring the protests, and we call on all parties to respect freedom and peaceful assembly and exercise restraint and avoid any escalatory or violent actions and respect the rule of law.
But can you imagine any of these Russian parliamentarians who voted for this draft law being able to travel to the United States?
Alex, I'm just not going to speculate on hypotheticals. As it relates to Russia, I believe what I said was that we have seen similar kinds of legislation be used by the Kremlin, not just the Kremlin, but other repressive governments to stigmatize and systematically repress civil society and media organizations. We don't think that this kind of legislation is in line with the stated goal of fostering transparency.
Thank you. I'll move to Alsu Kurmashevas, Radio Free Europe reporter arrested in Russia 6 months ago today.
Mm-hmm.
Can you update us on where you're standing in terms of designating her arrest as wrongful? Have you advanced at all?
So we are deeply concerned about Alsu Kurmasheva's detention, and we are looking closely at her case. We continue to press directly for consular access to Alsu, but I'm not going to get into the deliberative process of how we designate wrongful detentions or compare different cases.
I mean, imagine being deprived of your basic rights for 6 months, not being able to talk to your daughters in jail, not having there's poor conditions. She spoke about that herself last month. Shouldn't her mistreatment itself be good enough to move forward with her designation? We are talking about an American citizen.
So, Alex, first of all, in any detention circumstance in around the world, in any country, when it happens, whether it is wrongful or not, we are quite clear that those who are detained need to be treated with respect, dignity, and consistent with appropriate humanitarian law. That being said, on the issue of Alsu, we are continuing to look at her case, and we're continuing to press for consular access to her. But I'm not going to get into the deliberative process of how these cases are determined. Obviously, to say just broadly, journalism is most certainly not a crime, and certainly no one should be imprisoned for just doing their job.
You have one more, if I may.
I'm going to work through them, Alex, because you've gotten like 3 already. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So concerning the issue of the Chinese-owned ByteDance being forced to divest from TikTok, can you share any communications or strategies that the U.S. has been in contact with China, the Chinese regime, especially in light of this divestiture?
I don't have any updates to offer on that.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yesterday, Chinese foreign ministry said they welcome Secretary Blinken's visit to China. I wonder if you can confirm his visit to China next week.
I don't have any dates or specific travel to preview. Obviously, when President Biden spoke to President Xi a number of weeks ago, they spoke about continued high-level engagement and diplomacy between both sides. You saw Secretary Yellen conduct her trip, and as we said previously, we expect Secretary Blinken to visit again very soon.
And as you mentioned, there was a summit and a few high-level exchange between us and China. Do you feel there is more, the groundwork is more solid than he visited China last time?
Well, it's important to remember that what we are talking about is follow-on visits, diplomacy actions from the historic summit in San Francisco, or Woodside, rather, in which you saw a number of steps be taken in coordination between our two countries, specifically around mill communication, as well as steps being taken to address the fentanyl crisis. So I have no doubt that these are the kinds of things that we are going to continue to press and raise directly with the PRC in the event of any potential forthcoming travel.
And lastly, last week during his call with Wang Yi, was it mainly on Middle East? Did they talk other subjects?
I don't have any other specifics to read out about the call when it happened, and as Matt spoke about, the primary purpose was to raise with the PRC on any influence it may have with the Iranian regime to not take further actions that we would be viewing as destabilizing or malign. Go ahead, Sam. Yeah.
Biden has recently said, and he said many times in the last year or so, quote, "Were there no Israel, there wouldn't be a Jew in the world that is safe." Isn't that both false and antithetical to the First Amendment? Jews, Muslims, Christians, atheists, whoever are safe in the United States because of the First Amendment, because of the nature of U.S. society. How can this administration stand behind a remark like that, particularly about a foreign power that itself stands accused of not only genocide, but being an apartheid regime? Isn't that statement, "Were there no Israel, there wouldn't be a Jew in the world that is safe," antithetical to the First Amendment and false?
I'm not sure which these comments from the president you're referring to, but I have no issue or reason with the way that those, with what the president said. And I think what we are talking about historically, since the founding of the state of Israel as a Jewish state, is I'm sure what the president was referring to. Of course, we have freedoms within our own country under the First Amendment, but I don't have anything else to offer on that beyond that.
Well, I mean, he said this several times. It wasn't a one-off. He said it when he met Netanyahu at the UN, I think last July or August, and he said it since then. I think he said it once he arrived in Israel. But it says in the world, Jews are safe in the United States and have been safe in the United States way before Israel existed. Isn't that correct?
That is true, but you're also, I think your comments are essentially forgetting to take into account the deeply troubling and horrific history I'm talking about this in the context of the historical context.
My comments are doing what?
I'm not Sam. What I'm saying is that you are taking the president's comments out of context, and when it is clear he is speaking about it in a historical context, given the very horrific and troubling and terrible history that there has been of the Holocaust.
He said
Goyal,
it over and over again.
Go ahead, Goyal.
Questions on India, sir, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. For the last over 75 years, India have been conducting largest democratic open elections, and tomorrow India will make another history by going the largest democratic and largest elections on the globe from starting tomorrow through June 1st, and over 600 million Indians will choose a new government in the second week of June. My question is here now that is US sending any observers or any delegation for this election, and what comments you have on this largest democracy and largest election on the globe?
I'm not aware of the United States sending any observers. We generally don't in the case of advanced democracies like in the case of India. We, of course, are eager to continue to deepen and strengthen our cooperation with our partners in India. And we're just going to let the election play out. I don't have any assessment or comment to offer on that.
A second question, sir. We have so many conflicts going on around the globe, and we have UN, we have NATO, but Prime Minister Narendra Modi is very famous among global leaders, and they listen to him. Even in the Middle East, he is very famous. My question is that how US or the global community can use his influence to end these wars or bring peace in those conflict nations?
Well, Goyal, specifically in the context of Russia, Ukraine, if any country is interested in using its voice to further deter Russian aggression on the people of Ukraine, we certainly would welcome that. And in the current ongoing context in Gaza, any country that believes that they can play a positive role in helping us get to a release of hostages, helping us get additional humanitarian assistance into Gaza, helping to defeat Hamas, they certainly should and are welcome to play that role.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead
sir.
in the back.
Thank you.
First, as you know, Iran's Foreign Minister Abdullahian is in New York now. So I would like to know which kind of restrictions have been issued on his activities in particular, whether there was any message exchange between the U.S. and him or his team regarding the latest conflict in the region. And then I have another question.
Okay, so the United States has imposed additional travel restrictions on the delegation of Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdollahian, who is in New York for meetings at the UN. This restriction permits the delegation to move only within a 2-block radius of the UN headquarters district between the UN and the Iranian mission to the UN and the residence of the Iranian permanent representative to the UN and to John F. Kennedy International Airport. We take our obligations as hosts of the UN seriously, along with our continued concerns about Iran's destabilizing activities and support for terrorism.
Any message exchange?
We have appropriate ways to send messages to the Iranian regime, and we will continue to be clear to them about the fact for the need to further de-escalate and for them to cease their reckless and destabilizing behavior.
Yeah, another question. Sorry. So
You just got 2 questions. Anything else? If not,
a quick question.
all right, you can do one more, then we'll
Okay,
wrap.
thank you. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. So,
Then Matt's
what, so you mentioned about the security cooperation between the United States and Pakistan.
Mhm.
So lately, there are reports that apparently Pakistan allowed the U.S. to use some military bases inside Pakistan's territory to launch perhaps some airstrikes against terrorist groups in Afghanistan. There are some reports. I would like to know whether it's confirmed or not.
I'll let my colleagues at the Department of Defense speak to any military cooperation that might exist. Matt.
So in response to that, the second to last question there, you said that you have imposed additional travel restrictions on the Iranian delegation, foreign minister and his delegation.
Yep.
Yeah, basically you've reimposed the Trump administration sanctions, right?
Matt,
the ones that you guys
can't-
lifted and denied that you ever lifted any sanctions against Iran, right? The ones that you lifted back in February or March of 2000.
Are we back into the debate of
2021?
whether travel restrictions are sanctions or not?
Well, yeah, but I want to know. I mean, does this mean that those are in place for good, or is it just this one time?
I'm not going to speculate or get ahead of potential further visits. These restrictions are in place for this visit. And as you know, Matt, as the host country, we have at our disposal to add or alleviate any of the parameters that are in place in it as it relates to their
And then,
movement.
given that everyone has seen video of him walking off the plane at JFK and speaking at the UN today, are you at least prepared to say that you granted him a visa, or you didn't rescind a visa that he already had?
Well, Matt, I think it's
Because
safe.
visa records are confidential.
Visa records
But
are
he didn't
indeed
get arrested.
confidential.
He didn't get detained at the airport. He hasn't been detained now. So
visa
why
rec-
can you not just
visa-
say we gave him a visa or we allowed him to keep his existing
Visa records are indeed confidential, but I think it's safe to assume he's not here by magic.
Okay.
By
magic? No,
all right.
I don't think
Thank
so.
you, everybody.
Hold on.
Wait, no.
Wait.
You more?
I have one more.
All right.
One more, and that is: were you able to find out from Elle or anyone else if there's any place in the world that the Geneva Conventions do not believe the Geneva Conventions apply?
To my knowledge, I cannot think of a region or a jurisdiction where we don't. That our long viewpoint is that the principles reflected in the Geneva Convention, that those are principles that should be complied with
Everywhere.
everywhere.
So it applies in Gaza.
We have said that it's up to both Israel and Hamas to comply with the international law, including the principles that we believe are laid out in the Geneva Conventions.
So is Israel the occupying power in Gaza?
That is not what we believe to be the case, but we have long said it is important that both Israel and Hamas comply with international law, including humanitarian law that's reflected in the Geneva.
So Israel is
All right.
exempt
Thanks,
from
everybody.
the obligation
Thank
of being
you.
an occupying power in Gaza.
Thanks all.
The Florida Lottery is proud to support education by contributing billions of dollars to Florida schools and awarding countless Bright Future scholarships so Florida students can do more than just dream of a brighter future. They can create one. Learn more at FLAlottery.com.
Time to put yourself first and get the figure you've always wanted with laser liposuction and body sculpting from CMA, Comprehensive Medical Aesthetics. Dr. Rudolph Moise and his experienced staff can transform you in one simple in-office procedure. Localized anesthesia, minimal discomfort, faster recovery. Call CMA today and schedule your free consultation. 786-746-6464. Visit cmaesthetic.com. Begin your transformation. Call CMA today.
In 2020, you re-elected me to serve as your state attorney because you believed in my vision and it worked. Crime went down 30%. We kept dangerous criminals off the street, and together, with law enforcement and community partners, we made Hillsborough the safest large county in Florida. But on August 4th, 2022, Ron DeSantis threw out your vote. He illegally forced me from office under armed guard. I remember the date because it was the 13th anniversary of the day that I rushed to the hospital to witness the birth of my son and spent 15 minutes with him before doctors removed him from life support. My late son, my beautiful daughters, my strong wife, they inspire me to serve others, to do good. That's why I took DeSantis to court. The judge ruled that I did my job and the suspension was unconstitutional, but our fight is not over. My unelected replacement was handpicked based on one qualification: her blind allegiance to Ron DeSantis. Today, I'm running for election as state attorney to serve the people, all the people of Hillsborough County. I'm running to keep our neighborhoods safe. I'm running to fight for victims and to make our criminal justice system better. And I'm running to protect our values, for a woman's right to choose, for a fair and just system, and above all, for freedom and democracy. I'm running to do what's right. It's what I've always done, as a former federal prosecutor, as a father, and as your state attorney. I'm Andrew Warren, and together, it's time we reclaim the future of this community, our community. Join us in this fight.
Good evening. So tonight around 10:30 p.m., our deputies responded to the Indigo Apartments in the 3000 block of United Kingdom Circle in reference to a man who was holding a gun and then pointing that gun at several residents. When our deputies arrived, they heard one gunshot and encountered the subject who was still holding the gun. Our deputies fired at the subject. He was struck and fell to the ground. They were able to secure him and render aid. He was transported to the hospital and is currently in surgery right now. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement will conduct an investigation, turn their findings over to the State Attorney's Office. From there, we will conduct our own internal investigation, and thankfully, all of our deputies are okay.
At Duke Energy, we deliver electricity and so much more, like free home energy assessments, rebates for energy-saving improvements, payment options to help you better manage your budget, and even bill credits for helping the community use less energy. So no matter what you're doing, we can help you make better energy choices every day. It's just another way we bring power to your life. How much can you save?